You are watching the Fayetteville Government Channel. Up next, full coverage of the latest City of Fayetteville Ward meeting. Ward meetings are held at various times by City Council members to interact with and receive feedback from the residents of their ward.
This is the Ward 4 meeting, March 31st, 2014. I'm Alan Long, Ward 4, Position 2. Rhonda Adams was unable to be here tonight. She's chairing a seminar in Dallas that she could not reschedule, so she wasn't able to make it. Tonight we have on the agenda the Marinoni property has come forward with the development. Capstone Collegiate Communities is here, and they're going to give us a brief presentation of what they'd like to do with that property. And when Paula called, I told her this would be the best place to talk about it, let everybody kind of get the information at the same time I do. And after they give the presentation, we'll just open it up and let everyone ask questions. If you'll just direct your questions to me, and we'll get answers for you and go from there. So I'll open it up to John, and he's with Capstone Collegiate Communities. And John, appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about this development. We're very excited about it, and I want to explain some of the nuances of it. First of all, hopefully everybody's got a presentation, correct? So that they can follow along. Anybody doesn't have one? And I'm also going to hand out, pictures 1,000 words, so I can cut my presentation very short by letting y'all take a look at pictures of what we've done in other communities. And if y'all wouldn't mind, I've only got 5 of these, so if you could kind of pass them around and take a look. There we go. It gives you an idea as to is what we're thinking about for this development. I guess the first place to start, to make sure everybody's clear on the location of where we're talking about. This along the top edge is Weddington Drive on the north side. The site is set back off of Weddington. We're not looking at developing any of the frontage right there on Weddington, but the street coming off of it is at Marinoni. It runs right along that tree line right there on the eastern edge of the Marinoni site. So this area in blue that I've shaded in is the area that we are talking about. So I want to make sure, is there any questions about where this is? A couple folks had some questions about where it was in relation to the overall property. We're talking about literally this right side, about 25% of the overall area that you see here. So any questions on that real quick?
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
The blue is the property you will own if you go through with it?
That's correct, sir. Okay. That's exactly right. Okay, let me start by talking, now we kind of where it is, the cottages. And the way I want to explain this is, one, how did this whole concept, the cottages, come to be? Capstone has been, we've looked at a number of different types of housing products, and we've built a number of different types of housing products all over the country. And the cottages are extremely unique, and we think are particularly well suited for this location. One of the things, and we'll go through and talk about why, we'll talk about the neighborhood and how we've tried to design a neighborhood that's more than just a big box and a sea of parking. What we're trying to do is create a community. You're going to hear that word until you're sick of it, because that's really the fundamental difference between, we feel, these cottage communities and some other types of housing. And then I want to go through and talk about the unit types themselves, explain what the cottages look like, and then finally close on management and explain how these types of developments are managed and how it's different than some other types of housing that's out there. Okay, cottages. Where did this whole concept come from? Well, what we have found in our experience, and we are a student housing development company. We build student housing developments and in various different areas all over the country. Every place from New Hampshire to Oregon to Texas to Florida, we've built different developments. And you can see some of our cottage developments in those books that I'm passing out. And one thing that we have discovered is that if a student can live anywhere, it is in a single-family home right next to campus. And in every college community across the country, we see the 1920s classic bungalows that were built, they're nestled up next to campus, and they've slowly been overrun by students. And the challenges with that, of course, is you get more than, usually there's 3 unrelated restrictions, but you get more than 3 students in there, which the buildings are not designed for. You get more than 3 cars parked there, which is the yards are not designed for, and you have absentee landlords. A lot of folks will realize, well, wait a minute, I can rent my house, which is right next to campus, and I can rent it and more than cover the mortgage, and I'll just move a couple of miles away. No big deal, I'll commute from there. And we see this pattern happening over and over again. So we realized that if the students could live anywhere, they would live in these types of single-family homes. You have the privacy associated with them, security associated with a single-family home. I mean, most folks would like to live in a single-family home. But the challenge was, okay, how do you build this type of community and manage it, realizing that we're renting to students? And how does that work? And how do you create something unique with these types of communities? Well, it really starts, and here you can see just some of the various pictures, and you'll see them better actually. It's a little hard to see on the screen here, but you'll see them actually in the photos that go around, in the type of architecture that we're, in the neighborhood that we're trying to generate. All right, so let me talk a little bit about the physical neighborhood, the site plan itself, and how we can put design elements into that site plan that helps us from a management standpoint and helps us create that sense of community. The first thing that we do is we can use these cottages, and here's a big blow-up of it, in a number of unique ways. First of all, the cottages themselves, and we'll go through this, no two cottage on this site is exactly the same, because we have a number of different elevation types, which I'll go through in a second, and then we have a number of ways that we can paint those cottages so they'll look different. This kind of gives you an example where you have some differences in the elevations, some subtle differences just in terms of the porches and the way they work, some of the windows and the way they look, some of the rooftop lineaments. They all blend together in a classic style, but we can create some individuality in those instead of having just a cookie cutter, same in, same over and over and over again. This gives it a really unique feel to the cottages. So by using that palette, if you will, of cottages in these types of communities, we can create really more of a conventional streetscape, is what they call it. So if you look along the public streets here, along this area, and these streets actually are right along the line of the current master plan. That's why these streets are on here. They're showing what the current master plan that the city has. Now we're showing right now one connection up here to Marinoni and coming up through this way. And then a public street would run down like this. And then this would be a public street here that would end at this location right here on the edge. Now, along that public street, we would face the cottages. It does two things. One, having all those porches onto those streets, it creates that neighborhood feel. So that it really activates that street. Just in kind of the same way you see here, all these porches along that street really gives it a good neighborhood feel. And then you have street trees running right along that edge as well. So when you look through this, and when you drive through it, it really has that look and feel of a neighborhood, of a single-family home neighborhood. When you drive, and the other way we can use it, not just by putting them up on the streetscape, but a second way we can use it is to define the green spaces within the development itself. Part of the idea here is, when this is the main entrance here, off Marinoni, so you drive in here, and you immediately come upon the first main green space, right here in the center of this development. And what that does is it's what's called a forced perspective. By making that green space a pie shape, it actually makes that green space feel even further and further and further and longer, and then at the end of that green space, we put the clubhouse, which is a centralized, larger building in the heart of the development. And I'll talk a little bit more about what's in the clubhouse itself, but it really sets it off. But all these cottages are then lining it, activating that green space in here. We've done the same thing with this larger green space. Now, this also, the site itself slopes this way. And so all the rainwater comes down here, and this is where we're showing right now some retention areas. So these are green areas as well, but they're depressed, or a little bit lower elevation. That's where you see these dark green areas. They're a little bit lower in elevation than these light green areas here. But again, all the cottages facing onto it. Also, by facing the cottages this way, onto the green spaces, you hide all the parking behind the cottages themselves. So when you come up and you look and you're driving in here towards the clubhouse, all you're seeing are the cottages in this green space. When you get out, we have a pedestrian network that runs in front of all the cottages and in and around all of the internal green spaces here that the cottages face onto it. Now, it's more than about just creating these neat little parks, these little interior spaces. What we're trying to do is create that community, like we talked about before. And what that does is, this area, these cottages, have a sense of ownership of that green space. These cottages here have a sense of ownership of that green space. By facing them into it, that becomes their area, their green space. Same with these cottages here. They face inward into those green spaces and it creates a sense of ownership. So what we're doing is we're creating communities inside a larger community. Now,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
on the ones that are facing, so the porches are in the inside of the green space?
That's correct. All the porches are running right here facing into those green spaces.
The ones on the main street?
That's right. Their main streets run here as well. So again, we're also trying to create that fabric along here, that streetscape feel by having all the cottages face on, like you're looking here. So some of the pictures you can see, the other area, of course, is the main amenity area, the clubhouse, the pool area. But again, having all those cottages facing on to that pool area as well. So you have created another little community. So here you got some examples of it. These cottages here, you can see on your, probably better on the handouts we gave you, but all facing into that pool area. These cottages, you can see this large green space here that's circled by the sidewalk. All the cottages facing onto that green space. We usually like to have little pavilions. You probably saw them there. We'll have grilling stations and little seating areas inside the green spaces. In the other area, so we have the cottages on the street, we have them facing onto the green space, but we also use them to activate these pedestrian walkways. So you see right along here, we have all the cottages facing onto these pedestrian walks. It really creates a great pedestrian experience. You can see here's a perfect example of it in this picture, where you've got this walkway and all the balconies are facing onto the walkway. Same as here as well. So you've got those balconies facing into this. It really encourages pedestrian traffic, it encourages pedestrian movement within the development itself. So that kind of gives you a feeling for the reason for this, is we want to create these sense of community, these little communities inside the larger community. By doing that, you create a sense of loyalty to these individual smaller communities. And why is that important? Well, because management is a lot easier when people feel a sense of loyalty to the communities that they live in. If you have a unique place that they love to live, that's a fun place to live, that's a unique experience to live in, then all of a sudden when we say, you can't do that, you got to behave, one more time and you're out, it carries a lot more weight than it would if they say, well, I'll just move into the other flat. I'll go to another student housing development. That's no different than this one. I want to stay here. This is where I want to live. And one of the really unique things that we found in cottages is that we have right when the students move in, we'll actually have a cottage naming, where they'll actually name their individual cottages or individual houses. And we find that with the cottages, there's a sense of pride and ownership in this type of development than we see in other the flats type development. That they actually, when a bush dies in front of the house, well, that's my bush. We want you to replace my bush in front of that house, as opposed to if it's just there's no sense of ownership with more of a conventional apartment complex. So it's something very, very unique to the cottages themselves. Okay, any questions before we move off the site plan? Yes, sir.
Are these cottages for sale or for rent?
For rent. For rent. And I go, yes, ma'am.
Where is Lauren Circle on that map?
Lauren Circle?
Lauren.
Yes,
Yes, which is the neighborhood that will be mostly impacted by this?
Well, this is Lauren Avenue running here.
No, it's
I'm
on
sorry, Lonnie Avenue.
On the big,
So,
left off.
Lower right.
It's left off.
oh, here.
Yeah,
That's
that
left off.
area.
It's left off.
Okay.
Anybody can see this is
Yeah.
on the bottom of the
Yeah, it's left off.
right here? No, it's on the blue one.
It's on the little one, but it's not on the big one, and it's not on this one.
Here we go.
There you go. Thank
There
you.
you go, there it is.
Right here.
So all those parking spaces are going to be on the outside, correct?
On the outside.
Where, pointing next to the street I live in.
So Sang is your main street we're showing on the
Yeah,
right?
they are. They're right
That's
here.
This here.
Right there.
That's right
And the
there.
parking
That's right.
all along here.
Okay.
So around here, but it doesn't come as far south as down here. It stops.
Not very far.
Oh, you can throw a stone.
Just curious.
No, sir. Yes, ma'am.
How do you get out of the complex?
On to
You're
Weddington,
driving. And
here.
is that the only exit?
That's what we're doing right now. That's right.
Right now, are you thinking in the future there might be other
No, this is what we're proposing to the city, this is the entrance exit for this development right here, onto Lake.
Why are there stub outs on either corner?
That's right.
So why are there stub outs on either corner?
To comply with the master plan, is what we're showing here.
Excuse me, does the city require 2 entries?
It does, and we've talked to the fire department about that, and they consider 2 entries from a public street. So this would satisfy that requirement, these 2 entrances here. Even though we asked the question, even though this dead ends, does that still count? And the answer was yes. As long as you have these 2 entrances on a public street, it satisfies that requirement.
Are there any other questions before we keep going with?
I'm kind of curious, and Alan, I think you might know the area I'm talking about, this area that kind of comes out here by you. Will that ever be considered as an entrance or an exit to this property?
Lincolnwood is a street that's not built, but it's on the master street plan.
So
right
it
now.
could
The city
become-
has it easily, it could become in the future a street.
It will.
To this development.
Yeah.
But yeah, that comes out on the Sang right across from Archer, directly
Yes,
south of Cleveland.
where we need the most traffic on
That's where you're at, just before you.
right into your house.
Right beside your house.
So let me talk a little bit about the cottages themselves, explain exactly how this works. This gives you an idea of the 3-bedroom cottage. This is a rendering of it, I'll show you some more. This is a reality of what we've built in, I believe this one might have been in College Station, Texas, I think. Okay, so the floor plans themselves and how this works. In a 3-bedroom cottage, you see you have 2 options. You can have a 1-story porch or a 2-story porch. And then every bedroom has its own bathroom and walk-in closet. And we lease, to get back to your point, on a per-bed basis. That means that every one of the bedrooms is individually leased, and then the common area is shared among the residents that live in the unit. The 5-bedroom unit, see, this is a rendering of it. This is a reality that we built in another development. And again, there's a number of different ways that we can address this elevation. With a half porch, we're not showing it here, but also you can have a double-story porch, half porch, a single-story porch, and a double porch. And again, in this configuration, 2 bedrooms downstairs, 3 bedrooms upstairs. Of course, it has all the full kitchen, washer, dryer. It has, like I said, full walk-in closet. And then then we can take those 5-bedroom cottages and we can connect them to form either a duplex this way, where they're side by side, and you see the various elevations of the duplexes side by side, or we can put them back to back. So you can see in this case where you don't see the second cottage because it's directly behind it. This shows you an example of how those duplexes are configured. The clubhouse is sort of the central, the heart of the neighborhood. And this shows actually the clubhouse we built in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I believe also in College Station, Texas. We made some modifications to it since then, but we're still working on the final architecture for this development. But it gives you a sense of the size and scale of the clubhouse itself. This shows the interior. Some of the things that we have in the clubhouse: a full gym facility. We've got study rooms, tanning facility, sauna, steam rooms. We've got a club area that typically has pool tables, ping pong tables, shuffleboard, and also that is the management offices. And I'll talk here about management in a second. This just shows you some of the interior photos of the clubhouse itself and some of the amenities that we have. And one thing I mentioned before, in some of those green spaces, we also can put amenities in there by putting, as you see, a fireplace, grills, as well as the pool area and conference centers. In the clubhouse, we've also got the management rooms. And typically we have 5 full-time staff members. We'll have a manager, assistant manager, and a leasing manager, and we've got a maintenance individual, head of maintenance, and maintenance tech that's involved. And then we'll usually have between 10 and 15 part-time workers, typically students that we'll hire that will help out in the management as well. Management obviously is extremely important when it comes to student housing. And what we have found works best is that you establish expectations up front, and that governs how the place is, what the expectations are for the students. We have a list of code of conduct for the students, And everything from, if you leave a bag of trash on the front porch, is a $50 fine. So we try to hold, our goal is to create a unique, nice place to live for everyone. And so along those lines, we have a maintenance sweep every morning. Our maintenance staff literally canvasses the entire property, picks up every piece of trash that's on the property, makes sure it's cleaned up, makes sure the landscaping is kept well. And like I said before, by creating a community, you really do engender a sense of loyalty from the students that really helps us from a management standpoint. We find that our retention rates in cottages are much higher than the average in student housing. So we see that there's this desire to keep coming back because there is that sense of community. Another thing that we have as well is a courtesy manager. We'll go into the community and find a courtesy manager who will be in exchange for a free place to live on site. We'll do nightly rounds. Usually it's like 10, midnight, and then 1 in the morning, and then they'll write up a report. And then also, they can serve as sort of the first line if somebody is complaining about, well, the music's too loud. Well, the courtesy manager is the first one to say, please turn it down, and then give that warning right off, so that we're not impeding on police services. So we have somebody there 24 hours who can at least give that warning. 99% of the time, it's just turn the music down or something along those lines in order to make sure that it's well managed. Those are the highlights from a management standpoint. We're excited about this opportunity. We think that this is a great location. One thing I should mention, too, about the location is transit. It's already served by the bus system, and we're talking with the bus company right now. We've already had conversations. There is a bus stop out front. We would love for them to actually come in and stop at the clubhouse and go back out again to make transit as easy as possible from this development to the university. We believe that transit is absolutely paramount to this development and ensuring that it's an easy access from here to the university so students don't have to drive. In fact, what we found a lot of times where there is good transit, and we will have good transit here, is that really the car parking is really more like car storage. They come, they park the car there, and then they take the transit back and forth to school, which is one nice thing about this type of development is that everybody's going to the same place, everybody's coming home to the same place. So it makes transit use that much easier and that much better for the students. Like I say, I appreciate this opportunity. We are just starting this process. We understand this is an evolving process. Obviously, you're hearing about the development in detail for the first time. We're going to make the presentation to the city, but we're dying for your input. We want to know what your concerns are. I want to hear those tonight at the beginning of this process so we can make sure to do whatever we can in order to address all of those concerns. So with that, I would really appreciate any questions.
And I can almost promise you that you're going to get that input here in just a few minutes.
Great. Good. I look forward to it.
I'll start taking questions in just 1 second, but I have a couple that I want to kind of get out of the way, and it might answer some other people's questions first. Everybody's interested in ingress and egress to the east. Does Capstone Collegiate Development Properties have any plans at any time in the future, even possibly opening up or building or asking for it to be built Lincolnwood Drive?
We are content with this connection.
I understand.
This is the connection that we want. That's the connection that we need. I mean, that's all we can say is this is what we want, this is what we propose.
If the fire chief requires a second connection, which is a possibility that he may, would Capstone be willing to pay for that, or would they be asking to pay for that?
Asking the...
To build out Lincolnwood Drive.
And we're talking about, I mean, we have to cross that bridge when we came to it. I mean, the idea would be is that, we've had that conversation with the fire chief.
Is it on the table, I guess is my question.
Is the connection on the table?
Yeah.
Not from our standpoint, no. Because like I said, we've talked to the fire chief. He said he's content with these 2 connections. We don't need it for the development. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say. We're proposing this to the city. I can't tell you what the city will say, but this is what we are proposing.
Okay. For now, I'm sure there'll be more questions than that one. My other question is, and I've heard this from a lot of constituents that are concerned about it, is that Capstone Collegiate Communities, they believe, has divested of a lot of properties in the past. Is that true? Like, how many years would you say Capstone would own this property before it sold it?
You know, that's a good question. I think right now we are looking at the market has changed. The market is obviously over the past couple of years. Well, Capstone Development, there is a distinction there. There's Capstone Collegiate Communities, which some of the folks that were associated with Capstone Collegiate Communities were part of Capstone Development, which was founded back in 1992, I think it was. They built up a portfolio over the course of, I want to say from 92 to 2005. And in 2005, the market got to a point where they sold that portfolio to a REIT. We started then, the original Capstone Development, started looking at building some cottage developments. Recently, we have sold some of those cottage developments because of the fact that just where the market has been. That market has changed, and I would say that today, with the way the market looks, this would be much more likely to be a longer-term hold than, say, the ones that have been built in the last 5 years or so, just more the market and direction that it's going.
So how long did you hold on to some of those properties compared to how long you're saying that you may or may not hold on to this one?
Well, I mean, some of them, one property in particular we did is it was a year. But other properties have been 10 to 15 years. This to me, this case, I would say this would be the longer term, not the shorter term, given where the market is today.
Unless it changes.
Unless it changes. I mean, I can't predict the market.
So it could be sold in a year, or it could be
I
sold in
would say that's very, very doubtful that this one will be sold in a year. Very doubtful. Just know where the market is and where we project the market to go. I mean, some of the biggest market indicators that drive that, interest rates, we don't believe interest rates are going to go down anymore, and we certainly think they're probably going to start to trickle back up. That drives whether a property gets sold or not. Construction costs. Construction costs are doing nothing but increasing. That's going to drive whether a project gets sold or not. So I would say all the indicators are right now that this project will be held. The Capstone
for some period of time.
Alan, I have a related question to the question you asked here.
Okay, those
It
were my
has to do
two.
with the REIT. When you sold to the REIT, did you continue as management or did the REIT manage?
No, the REIT will manage. Okay. The REIT manages. That's correct. Now, I should say something about that, though. With this type of development and the type that it's geared towards and the type of development we're talking about and the quality of development that we're talking about here, whoever should this property ever get purchased, then the reality is it's going to be at a premium that they're going to want to keep the rates that have already been established. So and whoever owns it, Capstone or whoever, it's in our best interest, it's in their best interest to manage it to the highest possible quality, because that's the type of development that this is. That's what we're going after.
Is that what Kane Anderson has done when they bought the Baton Rouge property that you owned, and also the property you owned in East Lansing, Michigan, at Michigan State? Did they maintain that quality that you're talking about? Because I think that's a big concern many of us have, that we're listening to you give a wonderful sales pitch to us, but we are long-term neighbors, and we feel very, very strongly about our neighborhood, as you well know, Alan. And so that is one of the questions, is what assurances will we have when you are negotiating that sale, that the things we're hearing and the things that will go before the city, such as Lincolnwood not being put through, I think all of us as residents of Ward 4 are going to want those types of assurances. So that's one thing. And I've got a couple of, which bus company are you talking to? Ozark Transit or the university?
University.
Okay.
And can I answer the first question? The American Campus Communities purchased the one that you're referring to in East Lansing, Michigan. Same type of program in terms of management. I mean, the same number of staffing, the same type of program. I mean, ACC does have a strong management program. So to answer that question, again, if they're purchasing it, it's obvious because it's at a sales price that we were willing to part with it, which means that they want to maintain that same level of quality to ensure that that it keeps its value, that the project that they purchased keeps its value. So you saw that. Now, it was the university transit system. There's actually 2 lines from talking with them. Well, there's 1 line right now. I think it's a tan line that runs out here. Right now, it runs up, kind of works its way through here, then it runs out, and then it comes down through these apartments down in
And
this
there
area.
is no stop heading east.
And what we talked about, though, they are looking at, and this is something we're in discussions with them, potentially splitting that line in 2. So there would be 1 line that would run in this area, there would be a second line that would run up in this area. And that's what we're looking at is, okay, so how do we, in a perfect world, we would love it if the bus actually came in. We discussed this, came in, stopped at the clubhouse, came out, and ran back down again. I mean, that's really what we would love to see. We also talked about could there be the possibility of some type of a transit stop internal. I mean, as this whole thing gets developed, I'm probably, of course, my area is only in this box. I can't speak for the Meridones and what happens here, but obviously transit's important for the entire development area. So we talked about, could we put a transit stop somewhere else, either out here on Weddington. So those discussions are ongoing. I know, I can say this, they want to see transit serve this area. And they told me they will see transit serve this area.
Well, I serve on the University Parking and Transit Committee.
Good, good.
And so I know the many issues. And one thing you haven't addressed with parking that is a huge issue in Fayetteville and on campus is scooter parking. You are going to have to address scooter parking and make sure you have areas for scooters.
That's a good point.
Because scooters are a major, major issue.
Okay.
The other thing is the $50 fine for trash. For the student who can afford to live there, that is way too cheap. Because years ago, when the university raised the parking fine to $50, students said that was the threshold, and that was, what, 10 or 15 years ago? Now they don't blink an eye. So you're talking more like $150 or $200 for the type of person who is going to live.
If that's what it takes to deter, we would certainly look at that.
And you're going to hear from me a lot tonight because I've got a full page.
Great. Good.
I'm a research librarian.
Good.
And I've been all over your website, and I've been all over LexisNexis.
Great. Well, I look forward to it.
Good.
I just have, you kind of keyed in about, what are you talking about pricing on these?
What we have typically found, and we have not set prices in stone yet. I mean, we have a range that we're thinking about there. But we would see where a 5-bedroom cottage would rent at about the same level as a 4-bedroom, 4-bath in the conventional apartment complexes. What we have found is that the trade-off for living with 1 extra student is the same as is having the privacy and security of a cottage. So I would say that would be our benchmark.
And what is that?
In the 500s.
Per room?
That's right. Yes.
According to design standards, how much space is required per person?
How much space? Do you know that anything off the top of your head? I don't have that
That would be
number.
an architectural.
I would certainly get that.
I think that's an important issue. And the other question I have, and we seem to be ping-ponging, why 5? Why is 5 so important rather than 4? And I think that's a big question, again, many of us have here.
Sure. And it's a good question. I mean, obviously, a cottage is more expensive to build than a 4-bedroom flat. It is. I mean, you've got 4 walls, you're wrapping it, everything. But what we found is the economics of a 5-bedroom with that extra person in it, being able to divide that kitchen and that living area across 5 people as opposed to just 4 people, actually makes the cottages work, gets the economics to work. That's why we feel it's important to get that 5-bedroom unit.
Can I use your little map thing up there?
Whatever you
Would
like.
you put it back to where Laura's circle is? I guess the reason I have a problem with apartments here is that the university is right here. And everyone that's going to be here is going to travel to the university. And eventually, this will be developed. And this is the same, which is a major thoroughfare right now, which is a problem. And I know we have an officer here, but the other night we were told on a TV story that we're supposed to monitor our own speed because we don't have enough police officers to monitor our speed. So we're putting all of these students in here, They're gonna funnel up Cleveland Hill, they're gonna funnel by my neighborhood, they're gonna cut through, they're gonna go any way they can to get to the university. And if you think they're gonna ride the bus, they're not going to. Because I have them that live in my neighborhood, they have every opportunity to ride the bus, and they don't. They drive. So, an apartment with only students is going to funnel all those people out there, whereas if it were developed in some other way, they might not all be going towards campus. Do you understand?
You have
what
like
I'm
three
saying?
ways to get to campus, that's either through Weddington, or Cleveland, or around on Sang.
On
That's it,
Sang
that's all you
or-
have.
Well,
And all the cut-through streets, and you're adding
Yes,
800
that
cars
are
to
not
that.
monitored. I know.
We had a, Archie, you had a question?
Could I just respond real quickly to that before we move on? Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, Archie, I didn't mean to. All I'll say is that, based on our experience, where there is adequate transit and it's convenient, I mean, it's very easy to get on and get off, and given the challenges of parking on campus and costs associated with it, that we find that they ride the transit service. But that is important. Capacity is important. And as much as we want the transit to pull through, the university system to pull through, we want that to happen. But we found it's in our best interest, too, to ensure there's adequate transit, because we feel that from a marketing standpoint, it's very important to make sure that the students here can get there. And we've supplemented. We've added transit before, where we didn't feel there was adequate capacity in the university system. Or we've added private shuttles, and we've added nighttime shuttles when we didn't feel like there was adequate capacity there with the university system. That's something we would look to do here as well if we felt that the university system didn't have the capacity, that wasn't convenient enough, because you're right. If it's not convenient, if it's just not right out their doorstep, they're not going to do it.
Okay, Archie.
Yeah, I just want to be sure I understand the numbers of people and cars and what have you we're talking about. I mean, how many cottages, how many kitchens, how many
how many
beds,
students?
and how many parking places are we talking about?
150 kitchens. That's units, okay? Some of the cottages are duplexes, so it's 150. That's 702 bedrooms, and we have one person per bedroom. So 702 would be the total. Now you figure, on average, it's a 5% vacancy, so it's going to be slightly south of that 700 range. Parking, we want at least one parking space per student on site. I'm sure there's ample parking here. So right now, we've got 732 parking spaces, which comes out to about 1.04. That extra 30 parking spaces are there for guests, so that we don't have a problem with somebody having to park someplace else in the area.
Okay, we've got, Deborah?
Yes, I just want to mention what you said about the university not supplying adequate parking, and that might be one reason that they would rather transit. The university has just put in a 900-spot series of parking lots on the west side of campus, right off of Razorback Road. And that comes straight through the neighborhood. So
I'm sorry, I
that's
misspoke.
their property. That should be known to this room.
I don't, is that free parking though?
No.
No. That was really what I was trying to
Some will
say.
be really low, because it's park and ride.
Right.
Some will be very low. So all I'm saying is, there will be adequate parking
Well,
on the west side of the university,
Yes.
that these people will be.
I guess what I should say was, when you see a price associated with it, you can always find parking on campus. The question is price of it. I mean, it's just to some universities will have it, but it'll be $400 per space.
Okay, I've got two hands up back in the corner.
You go first.
Yup.
So have you considered reducing the number of parking places and maybe reducing the cost so that you would discourage some student from bringing their car and maybe going to the scooter? Have you thought about that?
We have looked at that. I mean, believe me, if we felt like the market could handle it, we would have as little parking as possible. I mean, we're having to pay for it without getting necessarily a benefit associated with it. So, but what we have found over and over again is the kiss of death for any of these types of developments is it's a great place, it looks great, I love it, but it's just not a parking. That is a kiss of death from what we found in other places. Unfortunately, I wish it was not so. I wish that was not the case, but unfortunately it is.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, one other point on that too. The other thing is banks. Well, the first question banks ask us when we go in for financing, tell us your parking count. So it's a hard time for this type of development, getting financing associated with it, yes.
Potentially 702 bedrooms furnished?
It's an option. What we typically do is we say, okay, we can either, if you and your roommates want to get together and pay, another development, we have a set of price here, but another development's around $35 per person, then we will fully furnish that unit. Or, if you don't want that option, then we will just provide it to you without furniture.
And
They can furnish it.
if it's one person per bedroom and they furnish it with a double bed, how are you going to monitor that it's just one person in there?
We do go in and we do have inspections, and we go through and make sure that that everything's above board. And we can tell too. I mean, we usually have those 15 student workers that work throughout, know folks, they know who is living there, they know what the situation is, and we can usually tell. Yes.
Follow-up, for 702 and you've got one on-site at night manager?
Yes, that's typically what we do. And we find that with that, again, most of the things that we see are really just turn the music down, keep it down, and that's sufficient for that. And that's what they're doing.
My question, right here, you keep using the term student. How do you guarantee that they are students?
It's a good question. First of all, it can be anybody who can live here. I mean, we don't discriminate against anyone living here. Anybody who wants to come and live here, we welcome. That being said, given the fact that we're talking about 5 people per unit, and then we're renting on a per-bed basis, typically folks do not come in and say, well, I want to rent an entire unit of 5 beds. If you do the 500 times 5, that's an expensive unit. It caters to folks that really are more, for those reasons, it's more popular with students. And I would say in most of our developments across the board, I think we'll have the manager, when they live on site, will, obviously not be a student, but other than that, it's rare that we don't see. Now, we'll see graduate students. And actually, think about it, we've actually seen a couple of, adjunct professors, given the fact that we are cottages, but, it's typically given the fact that we rent on a per-bed basis students.
So you don't see families?
No, we don't typically see families. No. Because, again, it goes back to the economics of renting that 5-bed.
John, I had a follow-up. A moment ago, you mentioned that you were providing parking without getting a return on that. Is that kind of an accurate?
I mean, if we want to parse the word, I mean, the reality is we're charging, it's built into the rent itself. So there is associated rent to it, but we don't charge a premium for the parking over and above the rent on the unit itself.
Well, I just wanted to clarify to everyone here, when the change to the definition of family happened to allow up to 5 residents per PPD, the person who sat in my chair before, Sarah Lewis, attached the parking code to that made them make parking available for every person in that residence if they use that section of code in the PPD. So that's where that came from. Donna?
We're about halfway through my list.
I've got all night. I'm not going anywhere.
I asked Kathy Deck, who is the head of the Center for Business and Economic Research, to run some numbers for me.
Okay.
And according to her, the second half of 2013, there is a 14.8% vacancy rate of student-centered apartment complexes versus 7.7% for Fayetteville overall. New projects in the pipeline, if they all go through, is anywhere from about 2,275 to 3,400. And I know there is also phase 2 of one of the student complexes to the south with 1,500 beds, and you figure it out from there. That is going to start this summer. University growth rate is flat. I look at those numbers from institutional research today, and university growth is under 2.5%. So all of the growth we have seen over the last few years is gone for the next foreseeable future. Higher ed is not getting money from the state, and so if we're not growing, and the university can't afford to grow, they can't afford to pay more faculty, they don't have room for new buildings. Haven't we already overbuilt? So why now? Why this property? And I'll go back to why 5? Why aren't you looking south where more of the student-centered complexes are. Why do you keep coming back here?
Great questions, great questions. Let me take you through, because obviously, we don't want to build anything that's not going to fill up. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for us to build something that's going to be unoccupied. So we've got to be very, very comfortable with the market before we're going to invest, not just in this process, which is an expensive process to begin with, but let alone start putting sticks in the air. So let me tell you how we go about this and the philosophy that we have. The first thing that we do whenever we come into a market is we actually talk to the people who are going to rent. So we hold focus groups in the market. When we actually bring all the students in, we usually have focus groups of anywhere from 8 to 10 students, and we actually divide them up into groups, and we sit down with them. We bring in our team, and we go through with them, and we say, okay, tell us where would you like to live, where are you currently living, tell us what price point you would pay, tell us if you've ever heard of the cottage development, tell us what you think of it, give us a sense as to what you want to see on this site. And from an amenity standpoint, we want to get their input. Over and over again, we heard, we love it. The idea, this exists in College Station, they've been to ones in Baton Rouge, they've been all over the place. So the focus groups came back very, very positive, some of the best that we've seen in any place. We do this, of course, all over the country. Second thing we do is we descend with our marketing folks and go and interview and talk to all of the managers of the existing properties. And we get their take on it. What is going on? We see that there's vacancies here. Help us understand what's going on and why those vacancies are there. A lot of times, sometimes it's project specific. Sometimes it's the location specific. It really depends. So you got to kind of look below that to see, understand. But we're also targeting here with this development, we feel a market that has not yet been targeted here. And that is the single family home market. One of the things we find in these cottage developments is it attracts the students that want the privacy and the security of a single-family home. All those kids are not living in all the places that you just mentioned. They're living in the neighborhoods. They're living next door to people. You're living next door to them.
Okay, well,
so what,
and they're going to act differently if they're living in a cottage?
that is our experience. And we see a lot of, I can't speak for obviously the people that are living next door to you because I don't know who they are. But what I will say is those folks, what I say is the folks that live, that they want the privacy and security of a single-family home that has easy access to campus, this gives them that option because it doesn't currently exist. Plus, the amenities that we offer, the community that we offer. So it's something unique in the market that this market simply is not seen today.
Okay, I've got Ryan and then I've got Walt.
Question, clarification, I guess, both of you. You said you're going to supplement the transit if needed, just making sure that.
We in the past, when we have felt that the transit that served the site from the university or public transit was not sufficient, then we have hired a private bus to serve our site and a private transit company to serve our site.
Because I know that's one of the current, I'm not sure, I know at least one of them has a bus that runs directly back and forth at Bay. It's not universally enough. They need to increase the students to ride the transit, having that dedicated bus, something that would be there. And just for this random road that Linden something?
Lincolnwood.
Sorry. It's not in your plan, but what is the city's plan?
It's on the city's master street plan as a development.
Yeah, it's not random.
It's not random. The city currently owns the easement to that road through the Hempthorne property. Eventually.
Yeah, it's a need of one.
Did you have?
That was.
Okay. Well.
John, looking at your design is, to me, much more attractive than, let's say, Sterling downtown. But for those of us who are residents who've invested a lot of money in our houses in the neighborhoods surrounding it, what's the benefit of this development to us?
I would say that the number one benefit is to hopefully pull some of those students that are living in those neighborhoods and relieve the pressure and give them an opportunity to live someplace else that's not in the neighborhoods. We've seen in other developments in other communities where we do attract a large number of students that were living in single-family homes into these types of neighborhoods. So I would say that's probably the biggest. And, you know, the other part of this, too, and I have to be very careful here because I don't want to speak at all from the Maranonis, but the commercial and does not come without residential. You've got to have a base. And what we have seen is where when you start a base and you have this, all of a sudden it makes future commercial development possible. And some folks would say commercial is negative, and some folks would say commercial is positive. I would argue that having commercial that is close and that you can walk through the development or through this area and connect it somehow, you can walk to it, I see that as a positive. I mean, in my house, we live 4 blocks away from a little commercial area. We can go walk and take our kids to walk to the restaurants and walk to the store. And to me, there's nothing better than that. So I would say that is a potential long-term benefit to the community. Of course, the Marinonis are the ones who control that. Again, I'm probably speaking out of turn.
Okay, I've got Kathy, then Donna, and hold your hands up so I can see them, and I'll call on you next after that.
The first thing you said about them pulling students out of our neighborhood, well, I've talked to the 3 parents that have bought in our neighborhood, and they buy for the investment. They buy so they don't have to pay really high rent. They buy so that that's an investment. Their kids have a house, and they can come and stay there, and they're not, and it's an investment. They're not paying rent. So first of all, that is just nil. And even ask Walt, because he lives in a much higher income development than I do, and they had, I don't know what it was next door to them.
It was a frat house.
Frat
I
house.
bought it.
Next door to them. And it's called an investment, and that's why they do it. So these cottages are not an investment. That's not going to draw the people that are settling in our neighborhood. That is something that the town and gown and the university should take care of, and so far that's not happening. But the university should take some responsibility there. And then the next thing I have for
Can I just
you.
make one point on that one, just so I can tell
Okay,
you? All
go
I can
ahead.
tell you is based on my experience, and we do survey the residents in other communities.
I've surveyed
When they
parents.
when they come in, we ask them, where did you live last year? And we see a large number of those folks say, I lived in a single-family home.
I surveyed
That's
the
what-
parents,
And
not
I
the students.
believe me, I believe you 100%. I know there are parents out there that are looking for exactly that type of investment. And that's probably because usually when we see that, it's because they can buy the house, and then they can rent it to the 2 other roommates at higher rental rates, that's right, and then are able to make a return. Well, a lot of times we see that because, again, you've got those 2 roommates. That means that the desire to live, the demand to live in a single-family home is high enough that those roommates are willing to pay that high rent, which makes it economically feasible for the parent. Now, in places where you do see cottage developments, the folks that are the roommates that are paying those higher rental rates are going to have another option with the community, with transit, with a bus. So it's not just about the parent. If that economic model doesn't work as well anymore, you're going to see fewer houses built. I'm sorry, go ahead, I cut you off.
No, that's fine.
Donna, you had a question? Your hand up.
Yeah, I know this isn't Capstone's first rodeo regarding all of coming into Fayetteville. And so you've heard things before, but one thing that is slightly different, you say that this part of town is right for that type of development. Well, somebody beat you guys to the punch because we have that type of development out on Rupel Road. That's exactly what's gone in there, our rental townhouses by a different company. But it's the same type of thing, you know as well as I do. You mentioned ACS, there's you, and then there's another company. You guys are the big 3 in this market. My question is, have you ever considered doing focus groups of the residents of the local neighborhoods? Because one of the trends is to do sociological and ethnographic research so that when you come before a group like this, you have an idea, and maybe that's what we're doing tonight, but you have an idea of where people are standing. And I kind of feel bad for John and Paul sitting here listening to everything, but I'm so glad it's the 2 of you who are here representing tonight. But the focus group thing, I think you guys could really benefit from talking to the residents in Ward 4 with very specific things that may not be coming out tonight, because not everyone is on the listserv, not everyone, and I am going to mention the big pink elephant in the room that we haven't gotten to yet, and that is the Weddington 540 interchange, and how that is going to impact all of this. And many of us were at Asville School recently looking. Have you been talking to the highway department?
As I said, we've just started this discussion with the city and with everybody else. I'm sure that's going to be part of this as we go through the process. So that's one of the conversations that we will have with the highway department and everybody else as we go through the normal entitlement process. But, you know, your point about focus groups with the parents and with the neighbors, I cannot tell you how thankful I am to have this forum. Because because we go to, you know, other communities, and there isn't this type of forum. There isn't this type of organization where we can get the correct information out there. So I can't tell you how thankful I am for this. In terms of other meetings, if anybody would like, and we will use whatever method that you all think is the best method to get the word out. If we want to have just a meeting of the neighbors that live in this area, I'm happy to come and talk and listen and take and do whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to come and do it. I'd be happy to do that. However we can get the message out, however we can get correct information out. My biggest concern is if the project lives and dies versus the right and the correct information, I can live with that. You know, if the city just decides, thank you, but no thank you, this is not for us, not right now, then the correct information is out there, I'm perfectly happy. What I hate, though, is for something like this to get turned down over incorrect information, where all of a sudden it becomes a rumor mill of misinformation that generates negative publicity that all of a sudden is just, we want to do whatever we can to stop that. So however you can help and however we can do to prevent that, I would love.
John, I've got just one question. I don't think we've touched on this subject at all, but that is an area of land that hasn't been touched ever. And we really respect the Mayor Nunes for what they've done in holding on to that property. What do you as developers have in plan for, are you thinking about taking advantage of any low-impact development, or are you thinking about any types of things to reduce the water runoff from all this increased pavements and the number of rooftops you're putting there? What are you thinking about for water quality?
You know, we were talking about that actually before we came in, and I wish the plans were further along to where I could talk about that even more. All I can say at this point is, in fact, we just came from talking with the University of Arkansas Community Development Group and going and getting their list of best practices to make sure we're taking a look, we don't miss anything as well. But we're looking at many different ways and implementing different stormwater treatment methods. But right now, I can't give you the specifics because, quite frankly, we're still looking at engineering.
You do know the city has a low-impact development code?
Yes.
Any other, okay, yeah.
I have another question for you. I think what you're hearing from us is that we're worried that this is the cottages are gonna become big frat rat house, you know? We're gonna have trash everywhere. There's a house right across the street from the chancellor's residence that's full of beer cans, and trash all the time. And that's what we've seen, that's what we don't wanna have happen. We don't want a ton of cars there. So what kind of crime rate has your Capstone properties had? Can you tell us the worst story and the average story? Because that's what we're fearful of. We have a great neighborhood, and we really don't want any more of that coming in.
I can tell you the worst managed housing for students is the single-family home with the landlord who's not there. That's the worst. That's where you see the keg parties. That's where you see the cars parked out front. That's where you see, you know, those types of issues. In terms of specific numbers, I don't have those specific numbers. I mean, for other developments and what those look like, I can't quote you Bible and verse right now. I will say that what we see, the folks that police these developments the most are the students that live there. What we do tend to find is we have because we're marketing for security and we're marketing for privacy associated with it, we do see a large number of female renters in these units.
Is it a gated community?
No, it's not. It's actually not really allowed in. And so with that, what we find is most of the complaints that we get, or most of the reporting that we get to like the courtesy manager, really are the, tell the person in the cottage next door to turn it down. And that's the type of things that we typically see in these cottage developments. And because there is that, because the folks that we're attracting for these types of developments more than likely are going to be the folks that value the security. Now, one other thing along those lines, there's that sense of security with having a single-family home, but also each one of these has an alarm system associated with it, which the parents can activate it. So what we typically see is you get parents who want to come in, they look, they want the place that's the most secure, that has the most sense of privacy associated with it, and then we're going to attract those types of students to these developments. Can I say that there's never an incident in any of these developments? No, of course not. I mean, there are always things. What I will say, though, is that establishing those expectations right out of the gate, people understand we're not going to tolerate it, and if it means a couple of evictions right out of the gate, we're not afraid to pull that trigger either.
So you don't have any crime statistics from your other properties?
I can't cite anything right now.
Really? Okay.
I'm happy to talk. I mean, after the fact, I could.
That'd be great. I'd really like to see that. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I think it'd be important to see the crime statistics from all the other developments in town as well.
All the other developments.
All, like The View and Starting with
Oh, what
Frisco.
you meant,
and
all the developments in town?
No.
That's a large
The
number.
other ones are specific for college students.
We have a police officer in the room. I'm not sure if you have any information. They haven't had any, we haven't had anything really compiled at this point because they haven't been open long enough, I would think.
No, I mean, you have to do a query and, it's not that hard to do. But
There is
If
a crime
y'all-
map on the police department website.
There is, and if y'all want to email me for that information as far as existing developments, I can ask that the staff put that together for you, and I can email you back. So that's something that I can definitely do.
Alan, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Going to this map up here, the streets that are shown in white, are all of those streets existing streets?
Except for the one that you see going right there where he just pointed.
Lincolnwood Drive.
Every other street is existing. Also, the street on the northwest side of the site plan that y'all are showing.
Runs out to Weddington?
That street is not existing right now.
What's a dirt road that actually serves the house?
Right.
Okay, so those two are not existing. Now, the second part of that question is, are there any other streets that are on the master street plan that you referred to that are not shown on this map?
There is one other, and it is just south of Lauren Drive, and that's Maple. And
Okay, now where is Lauren Drive?
Lauren Circle on the TV
Lauren
screen.
Circle, okay.
All right, I'll show y'all. Lauren Circle on the TV screen is in the bottom right-hand side.
Yeah.
It is the group of houses that kind of forms the circle, all the way out to Sang.
Okay, you got it?
Yeah.
Now, you say there's another
Just south of there.
south of the southernmost of those two.
Just south of there is Maple. And on the current master street plan, there is the eventuality of that going all the way to the freeway, but that's not.
I believe Maple's been removed from the master.
Okay, they might have removed it. The last version I saw had it on there.
And it goes across the bridge.
Okay.
So you're talking about down here and across?
Right, across 540.
It shows a trail, a walking trail, but not a
Sure,
street.
it used to be a street.
Yeah.
It might have been removed. I'm sorry. That
Well, there's
information.
one part way now.
Yeah. We've got a question at the back, and then Kathy, you had a question?
The master street plan does show the street that is on the western side of the development. The master street plan shows that one curving and going and connecting back to 540.
Connecting to a street.
Like that.
I cannot remember the name.
Persimmon.
Persimmon.
On the west side of 540, there wouldn't be an interchange there, but they would like to see an overpass.
That one day is on the plan for another corridor, but that's not funded and not planned at the current time. I've got one question over here, and then I'll come right back to you.
I'm just concerned that another university, and this is university, it's not just apartments, is coming in and it's sandwiching our community. And I want to know from the city, what are you going to do, what's the city going to do for traffic calming on Sang Avenue, which is right now horrible. It's horrible. And Cleveland.
And it's picking up on Palmer.
And it takes up on Palmer, and it also on Lawrence Circle with people that live there, on Markham, on, and building sidewalks is not traffic calming. And it's great, and that's wonderful, that's a great thing that you guys have done, that's awesome, that's Keith Beverly's getting right over. And my doggos like to run on there, but it's not traffic calming, and our city needs to address that. If they're even thinking about something like this, and this is not a done deal, and if they're even thinking about doing this, there's got to be some traffic calming of some kind. And are you the town and gown representative? I think I spoke with you one time on the phone, and you seemed to be, at that time, not in favor of the student housing being off campus at that time.
I think, I think the university definitely has increased housing on campus,
Okay.
and I think you made a really good point of the flat line that's occurring right now with student housing, so I think it'd be interesting to see how that's going to affect, especially with the already current.
Well, we don't have the roads, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the policemen to police those roads, and we have a wonderful police department. That's not what I mean. We just don't have, but there aren't enough. And the city needs to step up if they're even going to look at this, consider it. They need to step up and do something in that quarter. More than sidewalks.
I appreciate you saying that. I'll make sure to bring that out.
And I know that you've been fighting for that and really pulling for that, but they need to hear that from us.
And one thing that they did, I know at the town and gown level, and we appreciate our representatives to the town and gown committee, is they did push, and I fought for it too, that the western border of the town and gown discussion be pushed all the way to Sang. And that was a large discussion. And when they did finalize that border, I think it was important to push it there because that's where all the possible additional lighting, traffic calming, things of that nature will be implemented is within that boundary, and we really do need that relief.
So it can happen on Sang.
Right.
And a little west, that was pushed a little west of Palmer as well.
It was pushed all the way down to Sang, and all the way straight over across to 6th Street.
It cuts through, like,
It does cut through
the wood, it doesn't go by street.
Yeah.
I just think that our cart needs to come before that horse. You know, we need to have, or the horse needs to come before the cart, whichever. We need some infrastructure there to handle something like that.
I completely.
It's not that everybody's completely, like, against it. We don't have it. We just don't.
I'm going to come to you right after Aubrey.
Yes, sir. I would ask, Dylan, mention courtesy managers. Are they going to be qualified active police officers for the city?
You know, in a lot of communities where we go into, we actually like to have a police officer serve as the courtesy manager. Now, certain restrictions apply, and because it's in exchange for a free place to live, that doesn't always, we're not always able to do that. That's our preference, and we would love that. And in that case, the point of the courtesy manager really is not to serve as it's not a police officer, to serve as a law enforcement personnel. That's why we call them courtesy managers as opposed to security officer. Their job is to be that first person who's called, to be able to respond, to say, turn the music down, something like that. We don't want them getting involved, though, if it truly is a altercation or something that really the police need to respond to. In that case, they would be the ones calling 911.
I think they would be required to take action if there's a real danger and appropriately. So I wouldn't know that I would see the rule. I know in departments that do have police officers in that situation, that they do not wear their uniform or bring a police car there themselves, so that but they are observed and probably, I know they've made quite a few calls on certain nights, but it's pretty important that those are well-trained people, not, security officer or a person that has no official status, because that's a lot of people.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Aubrey, that was good. Do you have, okay, I have one question right now.
Yeah, I think the 700-to-1 ratio is wrong for your management. I was your director. That ratio is about 10% of what it is in some sports. So I think that's an issue. I'm not so sure a police officer would want to be there with 700 people and be alone. But that's beside the point. My biggest concern with this project is the 5. I think it's too dense. It's too dense from the beginning per acre basis, and it's too dense in terms of the number of students that are traveling and flow from this point. I understand to cost it out for your company, you need that, but I'm not particularly sympathetic that the price of the property causes it to cost out that way and then cost the building. Because there's other uses that could have been used for these properties if it was priced.
And it's not necessarily, I mean, land cost obviously goes into the mix, that's an issue, but it also has to do with management. I mean, what we have found is there's a balance there. Obviously, fewer people living in a development means you can't afford as much management staff. So where's the balance there? What is it, you know, how many folks do you really need to really run a development well? And we find that really for that 5, in order to have, we need 5 full-time employees to really run it the way we feel is necessary to run it. That's the economics that really drive the numbers in terms of the number of residents living there. But we find that that's the right balance. Sometimes it's not too much, but you're not overtaxing the management that's on staff there. But any fewer than that, then we start to lose people, we start to lose resources, and you know, we can't maintain it like we would like to. We can't have the budget for landscaping like we'd like. We can't have the maintenance budget that we would like. So that's where a lot of this economics come from.
All right, I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to wrap up, and then we'll get contact information out, my contact information, his contact information, and we'll be around for a little while. I've got Ms. Willett and Walt, and actually we'll take 3 because I see your hand up there in the back. So Ms. Willett, we'll start with you.
Okay, my concern, I agree with you on the density, that's too many. And I know a lot of it's going to filter down Sang Avenue, and I don't think there's enough that you can do to Sang Avenue to make it safe for the people who live there. And I speak from experience. I live right off Sang on Lord Circle, and drove up around that curve, Hallsville and Cross Street continued to drive it, but for 25 years drove it daily. That curve there, it's a very blind curve. You've got steep drop-offs. You put more traffic on that road. It's very dangerous. I did have a child that got hit on a bicycle on that street, and it's just a treacherous. We live at the bottom of a mountain, and you go around that curve. It's just dangerous. And if you start dumping 700 cars that are going to get out on Weddington and then come up Sang to go to the university or anywhere associated with the university, you're going to have a lot of cars on that street.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. Walt?
Alan, having just spent the past week in Austin, I'd ask you to do us a favor, and for the next Ward 4 meeting, I learned how to be stuck in traffic in Austin because they didn't plan very well. Could you bring our traffic designers, because I'm thinking not 700 cars a day, but 1,400 cars a day turning left across Weddington. That's already a train wreck. I mean, if I didn't know the back roads to get out of our neighborhood, you'd never get there after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So 700 more cars there will be really enjoyable.
I can kind of answer as far as bringing traffic designers to the next meeting.
Or a future meeting.
When was the Parks and Rec meeting last?
It'll be the 7th.
The 7th
of this next month.
Of April. Okay, so Parks and Rec will meet April 7th, and they'll determine the parkland dedication fees, whether or not if this development happens, whether or not they will pay a parkland dedication fee of approximately $90,000, or if they will have to dedicate a part of the land for parks in that general area of less than a mile radius. And so after that happens, it would go to the planning commission, or through the planning department. And at that point, when they start talking roads and all those kinds of things, then at that time, yes, I'd absolutely try to get the traffic designers in here, because that's a conversation that needs to be had, and that's definitely
The sooner
do
the
that.
better.
I'm sorry?
The sooner the better.
Well, we just got to get to the point where these developers are talking with city designers so that they actually know what they're talking about when they come here. I want to get to that point so that they can have an educated conversation about it with all of us. And then yes, that I've got that written down to arrange. Stacy, you had a question back there?
Three quick things. Is it possible to write the management practices in the wording of the PVD that will stay with the property should you sell it in a year or 15 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. That'd be a question really for the city attorney and to look at that.
Give me just a second, because I'm writing that one down. I'm writing that one down. It's a good question.
And then from the site plan that was presented to the Parks and Rec meeting earlier this month, has your boundary line changed? Have you reduced the property size from the south? It kind of appears that you have.
We did. I'm trying to. We went through so many iterations to come up. I mean, there's been so much back and forth, but yes.
Do you have any plans to possess any more property?
We're looking at just this.
And then, just an observation I have about drainage. There's a lot of water that comes off of the hillside that is to the east of this development that has never been properly managed. So I think that you're going to be the recipient of a lot of that off-site drainage coming to you, as well as managing the new drainage issues you're going to create.
Yeah, and we'll handle all that with engineering staff, given the opportunity.
There's an inlet on Sane that's between the Hectorn property and Temple Shalom, which is actually higher than the water flows, so it doesn't capture anything. So everything is surface drainage. It's not going into that inlet.
Okay, I know I said 3 questions, but I cut the gentleman off, so I'm going to let him
It's not
finish.
really a question. If you guys could provide, Alan, a list of properties that you had since you've been this new capstone.
Sure.
And their occupancy dates, I would say some Google time.
Absolutely. It's all on our website. I mean, just so, but I'm happy to provide it.
Okay. The other thing is, I think, in terms of occupancies, in the 3 versus 5, there at Google is your friend. I've done some of that, and you will get more vacancies in the 5s per unit than with the 3s, and that's kind of obvious. But I'd like to see that for your company.
Okay.
But I'm going to provide it now.
I will tell you that the 5s are the most popular because of the price point. Because we can, so they typically lease the first, but regardless.
What you're seeing is vacancies after first rental. And that's what the data shows on, if you Google, not just your property.
Right. I get that. I know.
And you made a good point. Where do we go from here as far as communication? How do we get information from Capstone to you, and how do we get it to people that weren't able to come here today? What I'm going to do is let Capstone communicate with planning, and I'm going to have planning send me everything directly. I don't want to go back and forth with developers and not know what I'm talking about. I want it all to go to planning first, and then I want it to come to me, and then if you email me, I'll send you anything and everything I get. That way you can all read it, and it's all factual. Now, I said at the very beginning of this, I'm not supporting this development, but that doesn't mean that I can't open up the conversation for people that do want more information. And that was something that I said before I took office and while I was campaigning, that I would never support development that took advantage of the 5-person per PZD. And I'm going to stand by that. I'm not voting for it. But I will promote the healthy dissemination of information as much as I possibly can. So please feel free to email me. I'll get you as much information as I can possibly get my hands on, and I'm sure these gentlemen will do the same. So if you have more questions, I'm not sure if they're gonna stick around, or not,
Sure.
but, I'm sure you can ask more. And I'm gonna stay here for 5 to 10 more minutes, and I'm gonna put this little piece of paper up here on the table up front. And if you want more information about this, please just put your name and email address on it. And I'll send everybody that's on this piece of paper the information as I get it. Yes.
You continue to send it to the Waterman Wood?
Yes, yeah.
And everybody else that's on your, the one
Yeah,
too?
if you've been getting emails, you won't stop getting emails. And I'm sure you'll see much more information presented through the paper and through the Fayetteville Flyer and things like that. But I'll try to keep everybody as informed as possible, and I know Rhonda will as well. Again, she was sorry she couldn't be here. She really did want to.
You've been very good about sending out those emails, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's about communication.
Okay.
I know this is an early iteration of what you're looking at. Would you have a problem if this were scanned so that Alan could make it as an attachment so that people who weren't here tonight could see it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we disseminated these. I mean, I would put the caveat that it is subject to change. Obviously, this is very early in the process, but we wouldn't be handing it out if we didn't want it disseminated at this stage in the process.
All right, guys. I appreciate everyone being here and taking part in this conversation. It's really good to get it going this early. I'm sure this is going to change a whole lot. So we'll just try to get all the information out to you as soon as possible. Really appreciate all of you being here.